Good evening, I'm Faye Kwan. Our top stories for tonight. Putin says aggression against Iran was groundless, and is the Israeli-Iran conflict a wider war in the making? That's coming up on AWANI International. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called the US strikes on Iran groundless and says Moscow is ready to support the Iranian people. He made the remarks during talks in the Kremlin with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who thanked Putin for standing on what he called the right side of history. This comes as Israel and Iran trade heavy air and missile strikes for an 11th straight day, just 24 hours after the US bombed 3 key nuclear sites in Iran. Israel said its fighter jets are now intensifying strikes around Tehran, targeting the Revolutionary Guard's command centers. Iran earlier warned that the US attacks had expanded the range of legitimate targets for its forces, vowing serious consequences. US President Donald Trump, meanwhile, has warned Iran against retaliation and raised the possibility of a regime change, stoking fears of a wider conflict in the Middle East. We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Kelima mau datang lagi? Mungkin shampoo anda tidak 100%. Mari kita lihat. Gunalah Head & Shoulders menghilangkan kelimomo sehingga 100%, membasmi kegagalan, melindungi kulit kepala sehingga 48 jam supaya kelimomo dan kegagalan tidak datang lagi. Head & Shoulders.
Asia tumpuan utama dunia. Dengan ekonomi yang semakin rancak, pembangunan lestari dan tenaga boleh diperbaharui, apakah pula impak kecerdasan buatan AI dalam perkembangan teknologi dan masa depan pekerjaan? Kami mendalami setiap berita dan cerita. Saksikan diskusi, dialog dan laporan khas di Agenda AWANI Asia bersama koresponden khas kami setiap Sabtu 9 malam di semua platform Astro AWANI.
As the Israel-Iran conflict intensifies with US forces now involved, what comes next for the region? Dr. Feroz Ali joins us now to unpack the developing situation. Dr. Feroz, good evening. Now, we're speaking one day after the US targeted Iran nuclear sites, Natanz, Isfahan and Fordo. On one hand, President Donald Trump is claiming success of a major blow to Iran's nuclear capabilities. But on the other hand, we're still seeing Israel continue its strike on Tehran and other cities. So what might be driving this continued action from Israel? And how would you read it in the context of the American military strikes?
Now, it is very important to understand the very reason why Israel lobbied US to get into a war with Iran is to achieve at least 3 aims. Number one is to eliminate entirely the 3 uranium enrichment sectors inside Iran. That is, as you have mentioned, Isfahan, in Natanz, and also in Fordo. The second objective is to encourage the United States to engage in a carpet bombing mission throughout Iran as a way of taking out the remaining missile launchers inside Iran, and probably to also encourage a form of shock wave to the regime, therefore destabilizing it. Now, the third objective is to potentially replace the regime with another government that probably can be friendly to the West and also Israel. Now, instead, what occurred is United States engaged in a very limited precision-based bombing on the three areas I've just mentioned. Only three areas. And the outcome from this operation did not yield any result close to what the Israelis are looking forward to. That is the eradication of missile launchers throughout Iran, and also destabilizing the whole government. We are seeing Iranian still firing missiles on daily basis to Israelis. So this form of outcome that the Israelis are seeing, it sends some form of a lack of confidence on the outcome of the overall American operation that we saw yesterday.
Right. Then, in your view, Dr. Feroz, do you see any other signs that could suggest the strikes are part of a real broader campaign by Israel that goes beyond nuclear containment? You know, as you mentioned, it's one that's aimed at destabilizing Iran's leadership, especially with Trump's public remarks recently on a possible regime change.
Now, in order to understand whether Israel is keen on engaging beyond containment of the nuclear enrichment program itself, we must understand how much support United States is willing to give out to Israel to continue with destabilizing the core objective of Israel. Now, to be really frank, in order to engage in destabilizing the region, it requires a lot of resources, military resources. And we also must be realistic at the fact that while Israel is militarily strong, stronger than Iran, its military resources is finite. Currently, the Israeli military is overstretched in Gaza and in Lebanon, and now in Iran. And Iran is really a big country. To give you a mental picture of the size of Iran, it is 8 times larger than Peninsular Malaysia. So it requires a lot of military resources to engage in an extensive operation to totally destabilize the region and hopefully with that encourage a change in government. So what I see instead is the Israeli government might want to really set back the Iranian government to a point where it is militarily weak and might not be able to project any form of threat to Israel for the coming 5 to 10 years. At least that is what the Israeli is looking forward to, especially so with the lack of support that is coming from the United States at this point.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about looking forward, you know, given the current escalation, very quickly, do you see the region heading towards a prolonged conflict, you know, one that's similar to post-2003 Iraq? Or is there still space, you know, however limited, for diplomacy to pull back from that brink?
No, I see it largely depends on where Donald Trump is going ahead with this. We must understand that within Donald Trump's cabinet itself, it is divided at this point of time. There are some of his supporters that has been lobbying him to not go further on this operation in Iran for the fear that there will be this 2003 repeat of Iraq invasion, where United States expended a lot of financial resources, military resources, a lot of casualties on his side. Some of those within his camp wouldn't want to see a repeat of it. So these people are pushing him forward, not to go further. And while there are also the neoconservatives who wants Donald Trump to engage further on this issue. So in my point of view, whether we're going to see a repeat of 2003 war, largely on Donald Trump's decision to support Israel or not.
Right, definitely a development that we will be watching closely as the world braces for Iran's response. Thank you very much, Dr. Firuz, for sharing your insights. That was Dr. Firuz on the Israel-Iran conflict. Now on to the rest of today's news. The UN's nuclear watchdog says that US strikes likely caused very significant damage to Iran's Fordo enrichment site. International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA Director Rafael Grossi, however, says the full extent of the damage remains unclear following the strikes on 3 major nuclear facilities. Iran has told the agency there were no off-site radiation leaks at any of the targeted facilities. Grossi also revealed that Iran had earlier informed the IAEA it would take special measures to protect nuclear material under international safeguards. He warned that armed attacks on nuclear facilities could have catastrophic cross-border consequences, urging all parties to return to diplomacy. Grossi is now demanding that Iran allow inspectors back in and report any movement of nuclear material, stressing that only negotiations can prevent Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Spain is urging the European Union Council to immediately suspend its key agreement with Israel, citing major human rights violations in Gaza. Foreign Minister José Manuel Alvarez says he will also push for an embargo on weapons sold to Israel and sanctions on those undermining the two-state solution.
The move came after the EU's diplomatic services report revealed last Friday that Israel had breached its human rights obligations under the EU-Israel Association Agreement, which came into force in 2022. Israel has rejected the accusations in a strongly worded letter on Sunday. The review of the deal was triggered by EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas last month, following calls from a majority of member states for a formal investigation. But suspending the deal requires unanimous backing from all 27 EU countries, a move many say is highly unlikely. The EU is Israel's largest commercial partner, with 42.6 billion euros in goods traded in 2024.
Meanwhile, thousands marched in The Hague on Sunday, rallying against NATO and rising military spending, just 2 days before the alliance key summit. The protests, initially aimed at NATO's defense policies, quickly turned to condemnation of recent US attacks on Iran, with demonstrators warning of escalating tensions in the Middle East.
Waving Palestinian and Iranian flags, demonstrators carried banners reading "No Iran War," "Hands off Iran," and "Disband NATO," demanding for de-escalation and diplomacy.
NATO either has to be what it pretends to be, a defense organization, or disband. I mean, there is no need for it. There's no need for this provocation, this 5% of GDP spending on weapons, and all of that will benefit the military-industrial complex. So let's be very, very clear. This has nothing to do with the needs of people. This is to do with putting money in the pockets of the weapons manufacturers and the banks and the entire military-industrial complex, who's just getting richer and richer on the backs of women and children.
The 32-nation alliance begins its annual meeting Tuesday, with leaders expected to agree on a defense spending hike to 5% of GDP by 2035, a target long pushed by Washington. Spain had opted out from the plan, calling the target disproportionate and that it would meet all its commitments to NATO by spending only 2.1% of its GDP.
The report wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more, and be sure to follow our social media accounts at Power Affairs. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.